The Galactic Council's assembly chamber was rarely ever silent. With hundreds of species represented, each with their own ways of communicating, posturing, and debating, there was usually a low hum of discussion, the occasional argument, or some species-specific ritual display happening at any given time. But today, the room was so quiet that the soft mechanical hum of life support systems echoed like distant thunder. Every eye, whether compound, multifaceted, digital, or simply humanoid, was locked on the central screen that played a video feed on loop. Each cycle of the footage seemed more surreal than the last. A lone human captain, Jack Harper, stood inches away from what was universally regarded as one of the most dangerous life forms known in the galaxy, the Cathan Death Beast. He wasn't fighting it, or defending himself, or fleeing. He was scratching it behind its horns, like one would pet a loyal dog. To most species in the room, this image defied logic, biology, and survival instinct. The Cathan Death Beast wasn't just another apex predator. It was a nightmare wrapped in muscle and venom, with a spiny, armored hide capable of shredding through ship-grade alloys and a natural aggression so intense that even apex hunters from other warlike species kept their distance. The Death Beast had long been considered untamable. Even the Cathan themselves, a fearsome warrior race, used the beasts only sparingly in rituals or battle arenas. And yet, here was a human, casually rubbing its scalp. Counselor Veer of the Zorthian Collective, a being with a jellyfish-like body floating in a suspension pod, was the first to break the silence. "This behavior defies all known survival instincts," he said, his voice filtered through a translator that stripped it of emotion. "The Death Beast's venom can pierce war armor. Its claws can dismantle tank plating. Its temperament has no known equal in hostility. And yet, this human, this Harper, stands before it, unarmored, and pets it." Tendrils twitched in what might have been confusion or disbelief. Zrax, a towering reptilian from the Drar Dominion, leaned forward. His thick tail thudded against the floor as he spoke. Perhaps the footage was doctored, a holographic trick. His words, though gruff, carried the undercurrent of hope that this was merely a ruse and not an earth-shattering anomaly. "No trick," came the amused voice of Admiral Garv, Earth's representative. A seasoned veteran with graying hair and a spark in his eye, Garv wasn't one to gloat. But this time, he couldn't hide the pride in his voice. "That's real footage, taken by one of our own survey drones. The man in the video is Captain Jack Harper, veteran explorer, decorated officer, and, as it turns out, something of an animal whisperer." A wave of murmurs rose through the chamber. Even the Kian ambassador, whose bioluminescent body usually remained dim in council meetings, began to glow in soft pulses of intrigue. Garv gestured to the center of the room, and a hologram flickered to life. It projected a three-dimensional image of Harper, tall, athletic, scruffy around the edges, like someone who spent more time outside than behind a desk. One hand rested firmly on the head of the Death Beast, its spines retracted, its massive jaw slightly slack as it leaned into the contact like a sleepy pet. "This happened during a mission to Cathra Prime," Garv continued. "We had a reconnaissance team surveying the terrain for a potential alliance with the Cathan people. Harper led the team. Standard operating procedure called for minimal contact, especially when it came to their beasts. But something happened. Something no one expected. The chamber lights dimmed as the hologram shifted into a full playback of the recorded footage. A scarlet landscape emerged, dusty, dry, and scattered with jagged outcroppings. Harper stood at the front of his crew, all of them tense, weapons drawn. Massive hulking shapes moved in the distance, Cathan death beasts. They were larger than elephants, armored like tanks, and bristling with spines that seemed to pulse with deadly energy. The crew's audio came through, heavy with uncertainty and fear. "Sir, we should fall back. Those things are circling us. But Harper's voice remained calm. "Hold position. Don't raise your weapons. Let me try something." And then he stepped forward. The beast in front of him turned its head, teeth bared, its eyes narrow slits glowing faintly orange. It growled a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the video like a distant avalanche. Harper didn't flinch. He moved slowly, his hands visible, body language open. I remembered something my grandfather used to tell me. His voice narrated over the footage. "Animals can sense your intentions. If you're calm, they'll be calm. If you're kind, they'll respond to that." So I took a deep breath, and I reached out. In the video, Harper extended one hand. It hovered just inches from the beast's snout. The death beast let out a sharp huff of breath, its spines rattling ominously. The tension was palpable. Then, almost impossibly, it lowered its head slightly. Harper touched it just lightly at first. Then slowly, gently, he began to rub behind its horn ridges. The transformation was instant and extraordinary. The spines retracted. The beast let out a low sound, not a growl this time, but something resembling a purr. Its massive body shifted into a relaxed posture. It even closed its eyes slightly, like a contented house cat. The feed ended. The chamber remained quiet. "This is not normal," muttered one delegate, the ambient color of his skin cycling through confusion. "This should not be possible. It wasn't supposed to be." Garv agreed. But it happened. And it's not the first time something like this has occurred. We humans, we have something, a way of connecting, of reaching out, even to the most unlikely beings. The council broke into hushed conversation. Some were excited, others uneasy. The implications were vast. If humans could calm or bond with creatures like the death beast, what else were they capable of? How many seemingly hostile species could be pacified? How many wars might be avoided? Councillor Veer's pod pulsed as he processed the footage. This phenomenon, this human ability, must be studied further. If it's not unique to Harper, but representative of their species, it could become one of the most valuable tools the Galactic Collective has ever known. Zrax nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced by a growing curiosity. If a human can walk up to a death beast and earn its trust, what does that say about our assumptions of civilized interaction? Admiral Garv leaned back, allowing the room to absorb the enormity of what had just been witnessed. "You call it bizarre," he said. "Reckless. Illogical, but we call it instinct. We call it connection. You see a monster, we see a potential friend. Harper calls it the human touch. You'll see it again." From that moment on, Captain Harper's name spread like wildfire across galactic networks. News of his encounter with the Cathan Death Beast wasn't just a curiosity, it was a revelation. Scientific communities scrambled to review the footage frame by frame. Diplomats debated how to leverage this strange human capability in negotiations, and ordinary citizens across dozens of planets found themselves inspired, amused, or deeply unsettled by the idea that a human could pet a creature more feared than a black hole. Back on Earth, Harper himself had little time to reflect on his newfound fame. When asked about the incident during a short debrief, he simply shrugged. "It wasn't about taming it," he said. "It was about respect. I didn't try to dominate it. I just let it know I wasn't a threat, and it responded. That's not magic. That's empathy. But for many across the galaxy, it might as well have been magic." In the weeks that followed, other reports began to emerge, smaller, less dramatic, but telling. A human crew member aboard a Centauri vessel had calmed a panicking juvenile predator by softly singing to it. Another incident involved a human engineer forming a bond with a massive, aggressive maintenance drone that had become erratic after software corruption, simply by talking to it and offering maintenance like a caregiver rather than a mechanic. Patterns began to emerge. Humans weren't just adaptable in body, they were emotionally agile, intuitive, willing to risk personal safety for the sake of building rapport. whether it was cultural, evolutionary, or something more mysterious. One fact became clear to every species watching the footage of Jack Harper and the Cathan Death Beast. Humans didn't just survive by fighting or fleeing. Sometimes they survived and thrived by reaching out their hand and hoping the creature on the other end didn't bite. The galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The term human touch didn't mean much to most species across the galaxy, at least not until the footage of Captain Jack Harper spread through interstellar channels like wildfire. In human culture, it had always carried a kind of quiet, unspoken weight. It meant something more than just the physical act of contact. It meant warmth, understanding, empathy. It meant being seen, being known. For Harper, that simple gesture, reaching out and placing his hand gently on the rough, venomous hide of the Cathan Death Beast, wasn't a calculated move. It was instinct. An impulse rooted so deeply in what it meant to be human that he didn't question it. He just acted. But to the rest of the galaxy, it was a revelation. After the Galactic Council reviewed and authenticated the footage of Harper's contact with the Death Beast, conversations began erupting across research stations, political chambers, and news feeds. What was this human trait? Was it genetic, behavioral, learned? Programmed through some kind of neural empathy matrix? Species with minds built on logic or survival instincts struggled to process the idea that vulnerability and connection could be tools, not liabilities. Admiral Garv, Earth's longtime representative to the Council, found himself answering more questions in the days following the incident than he had in his entire career. "Yes, we pet things," he explained with a tired smile during a broadcast with a cluster of xenobiologists from the Keith Enclave. "It's not just about animals either. We hug each other. We shake hands. We ruffle a kid's hair when they do something brave. Physical contact is how we say, 'You're safe with me.'" The Keith lead researcher, Dr. Venari, blinked slowly, her luminous tendrils swaying with skepticism. "But contact is dangerous. Statistically, close proximity increases risk." "That's true," Garv said, nodding. "But we do it anyway. That's the point." The research community was split. On one side, highly analytical species like the Zorthians, Excelarians, and Yavanes sought to dissect the phenomenon in labs. They wanted data, neurotransmitter analysis, hormone sequencing, and behavioral pattern mapping. They ran simulations, modeled interactions, even recruited human volunteers to pet alien creatures in controlled environments. On the other side, more intuitive cultures like the Erixi and the Lumarai embraced the idea as something spiritual, almost sacred, a sign that humanity was attuned to something beyond logic, beyond survival. They called it the bond flame. But to Harper, and most humans, it was just part of who they were. When asked to explain what happened on Cathra Prime during an interspecies conference, Harper didn't launch into neuroscience or philosophy. He leaned into the microphone and said, "I wasn't trying to control the Death Beast. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just felt like it was scared, same as we were. So I showed it that it didn't have to be. That was it. No grand plan, no predictive algorithm. Just a gut feeling, and it worked." His words struck a nerve. To many alien species, fear and power were intertwined. Where one existed, the other had to dominate. But what Harper described was the opposite. He didn't use force to establish trust. He used vulnerability. For weeks afterward, the phrase "the human touch" started showing up everywhere. Galactic memes, news op-eds, scientific journal entries, merchandising. Harper's image scratching the Cathan Death Beast's horned head became a kind of cultural icon, shared in countless systems. But behind all the hype, the Council realized something critical. Humanity's ability to bond wasn't just unusual, it was potentially strategic. A subcommittee was formed within the Galactic Council to study and explore the phenomenon. They brought in experts from across the known species: behaviorists, sociologists, evolutionary theorists, even diplomats. They dubbed the project Project Empath. One of the leading minds behind it was Dr. Senvial, a brilliant Orixi psychologist who had spent her career analyzing nonverbal communication patterns across species. She traveled to Earth, embedded with human families, military units, rescue teams, and even zoo staff to observe how these so-called bonds formed in real time. What she discovered changed her life. "It's not just that humans can form bonds," she wrote in her report. "It's that they seek them out, even when there's no logical benefit. They feed stray animals. They sing to plants. They grieve for creatures they never met. They form attachments with things that other species would consider inconsequential. In their psychology, connection is survival." She concluded her analysis with a sentence that sent ripples through the council chambers. "For humans, love is not earned by safety. Safety is earned by love." In the following weeks, this line was quoted in hundreds of languages, carved into monument walls, painted on ships, and taught in interspecies diplomacy classes. The simplicity of the idea and the radical inversion it represented was profound. Dr. Vayal wasn't the only one researching. On Mars Station X, a team of xenobiologists led by Professor Elon Trusk conducted a hormone analysis on several human-animal interactions. They discovered an unusual combination of neurochemical activity, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and a unique electrical signature associated with human skin contact. These chemical reactions weren't just limited to interactions with familiar species. They occurred even in first-contact scenarios like Harper's encounter with the Death Beast. But the real breakthrough came when the researchers tried to replicate the effect with artificial intelligence simulations and robotic surrogates. Didn't work. The creatures, whether alien fauna or bioengineered proxies, did not respond to mechanical simulations of affection. There was something intangible in the way humans moved, looked, breathed. Something that couldn't be reduced to code. Empathy wasn't just an input, it was an aura, and it wasn't limited to animals. A particularly dramatic example came from a Xentari diplomatic mission, where a human negotiator defused a volatile conflict between two rival planetary factions, not through rhetoric, but through listening. Just listening. He sat with each leader, heard their grievances, acknowledged their pain, and treated them like people instead of problems. Weeks later, the factions signed a cooperation agreement. The negotiator never once raised his voice or threatened consequences. His weapon was empathy. Stories like this kept piling up. One human crew, stranded on a jungle moon, made peace with a territorial, hive-based insect species by mimicking their grooming behavior. Another Earth-born veterinarian taught aquatic colonists how to communicate with hostile marine predators by using rhythm and music. A human child, barely 7 years old, calmed a panicking alien refugee child during a council crisis by offering her stuffed toy. The act diffused an entire evacuation panic. All of this fed into a growing realization. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't a weapon at all. As the Galactic Council debated the best way to utilize this emerging soft power, arguments arose. Some saw it as an advantage to be leveraged station humans as peacekeepers, animal handlers, cultural liaisons. Others cautioned that weaponizing empathy could backfire, turning a beautiful trait into another tool of manipulation. Captain Harper stayed out of the politics. While the galaxy turned him into a symbol, he remained grounded. He didn't see himself as a hero or a legend. He was a guy who reached out his hand to a creature in pain and got lucky. But Garv saw more. Back on Earth, the Admiral pulled Harper aside one evening in the quiet observatory of a lunar station. "You know what you did out there, don't you?" Garv asked. "I petted something that could have killed me," Harper said, raising an eyebrow. Garv chuckled. Yeah. But more than that, you reminded the galaxy of something they forgot." "What's that?" "That it's okay to be kind. Even when it doesn't make sense." Harper didn't respond right away. He stared out the wide glass dome at the stars and how small they looked, even though he knew they were massive beyond comprehension. "Do you think they'll listen?" he asked quietly. "Some will, some won't," Garv replied. "But you planted something, and it's growing." The council eventually voted to approve a humanitarian research initiative building on Project Empath. They called it the Human-Animal Cooperation Program, though many joked that the acronym HACP sounded too much like happy, which, ironically, fit. Human ambassadors trained not only in diplomacy but in veterinary science, behavioral psychology, and intercultural communication began deploying to conflict-ridden planets. Their mission: connect, not conquer. Understand, not subdue. Some planets resisted the idea at first. Pride, suspicion, or fear got in the way, but others welcomed it with open arms, especially those where local species had proven impossible to communicate with until a human showed up, squatted down, extended a hand, and whispered, "Hey, it's okay." In those moments, something happened. The galaxy changed, not with fanfare or battle cries, but with the quiet magic of empathy, the touch of a hand, a steady voice, a willingness to trust. In time, the phrase "the human touch" lost its novelty. It became a concept, a doctrine, a quiet revolution in the way civilizations dealt with the unknown. And it all started with one man who saw a monster and chose to treat it like a friend. Captain Jack Harper wasn't a man who enjoyed being the center of attention. Back on Earth, he'd always felt more comfortable on the fringes out in the field, alone under the stars, or sitting quietly in a ship's observation deck while the universe unfolded in silence. But things changed after Cathra Prime. When the footage of him calmly petting a Cathan death beast hit the galactic networks, he became a symbol. To the Cathan people, he became something even more an anomaly. An outsider who had done what only the most revered Cathan warriors had ever achieved: bond with a death beast. The Cathan weren't known for sentimentality. Their culture was ancient, fierce, and grounded in a rigid code of strength, loyalty, and honor. Their beasts were not pets. They were sacred extensions of their spirit-living weapons, partners in battle, symbols of a warrior's worth. For Harper to not only survive a close encounter, but to tame and soothe one of their fiercest creatures was unprecedented. And yet, rather than being met with resentment or suspicion, Harper was received with something else: respect. After days of negotiations and ceremonial observation, Harper and his crew were granted honorary status within Cathan society. It was a title that hadn't been offered to outsiders in generations. A formal delegation met them at the gates of the capital settlement, tall, armored Cathan warriors with deeply scarred hides and ceremonial weapons slung across their backs. At the front stood Zor, a high-ranking Cathan war leader and the first to approach Harper after the incident. Zor was a massive figure, his voice like rolling thunder. His armor bore the marks of dozens of battles, and his death beast, Korvax, loomed just behind him, muscular, alert, yet curiously calm in Harper's presence. "You and your crew have done what we believed impossible," Zor said, his words thick with his native accent, yet clear through the translator. "You walked among our sacred beasts without fear. You touched one, and it did not kill you. That is not luck, human. That is understanding. That is power." Harper inclined his head respectfully. "We didn't come here to conquer or challenge. We just wanted to learn. And maybe be friends." Zor studied him for a long moment. His eyes, sharp and unreadable, eventually softened, just enough to betray a trace of approval. "You will join the hunt." At first, Harper thought he'd misunderstood. "The what?" "The great hunt," Zor repeated. "A sacred tradition. It is how we prove worth, how we show the bond between warrior and beast. If you're to be one of us, you must take part." Harper looked over at his crew, who all exchanged equally wary glances. "All right," he said after a pause. "We'll join. What do we need to do?" The preparations for the great hunt began the next morning. The Cathan ceremonial arena, an ancient, massive structure carved from volcanic rock, bustled with activity. Warriors polished their armor. Death beasts were fed and prepped, and chants echoed through the red stone corridors like a heartbeat. The air itself felt charged, as if it recognized the significance of what was about to happen. Harper and his crew were given traditional Cathan garb, tough leather adorned with bone clasps, patterned cloth representing their new clan affiliation, and a small crest worn over the chest, symbolizing the bond between warrior and beast. Though not as heavy or ornate as the full battle armor, the garments held deep cultural meaning. Zor approached Harper personally as the sun began to rise over the cliffs. He held out a long ceremonial spear. "This belonged to one of our greatest beastmasters," he said. "It is not being wielded by any outsider. Today it belongs to you." Harper accepted the spear with quiet reverence. "I'll do my best to honor it." "You already have," Zor replied, then motioned to the side. "This is Gorth." The beast that stepped forward was larger than the one Harper had first encountered, heavier, older, with long ridged horns and deep scars across its hide. Its eyes locked with Harper's as it sniffed the air. "Will he accept me?" Harper asked. Zor didn't answer. He didn't need to. This was the test. Harper stepped forward slowly, just as he had before, his posture relaxed. Hands open, voice calm. "Hey there, big guy," he murmured. "Let's make this work, all right?" The beast growled low in its throat, but didn't move to attack. Harper extended his hand, pausing inches away from Gorth's massive head. A moment passed, then another. Finally, Gorth leaned forward, touching Harper's palm with his snout. A slow, rumbling exhale followed, and Harper felt a kind of pressure release from the gathered crowd. Zor smiled for the first time. "He has chosen you." The hunt itself began in the thick alien jungles of Cathra Prime, a place teeming with danger and wonder. Massive trees with spiraled bark and glowing leaves reached toward the sky. Vines, thick as cables, swayed in a wind that never touched the ground. The ground trembled occasionally, not from tectonics, but from the weight of the beasts moving through the terrain. Each warrior was paired with their bonded beast and given a general region to hunt. The prey, a Grath six-legged, bull-sized herbivores known for their speed and aggression when cornered. Capturing one wasn't just a matter of force. It required coordination, trust, and precise timing between warrior and beast. As Harper and Gorth moved through the dense underbrush, the bond between them deepened. Harper gave short verbal cues, reinforced with gentle taps on Gorth's flank or gestures with his spear. Gorth, in turn, moved with an uncanny sense of timing, watching Harper, matching his pace, and reacting to his commands. Harper had spent his life working with animals on Earth: canines, horses, even a few wild rescues during his early planetary missions. But Gorth was something else. This wasn't just training or instinct. It was a relationship. Gorth wasn't just responding, he was thinking with Harper. When they finally located a Grath near a cliffside watering hole, the moment arrived. Harper crouched low behind a fallen tree. Gorth did the same. "There it is," Harper whispered. "You ready?" Gorth gave a soft, almost eager growl in response. With a quick signal, Harper broke cover. The Grath bellowed and turned to run, its 6 legs hammering the ground, but Gorth was faster. The death beast lunged forward, claws slicing through the vines and vegetation, intercepting the Grath with calculated ferocity. As the beast latched onto the prey, Harper dashed forward and delivered the ceremonial strike with his spear, piercing the Grath's hide just behind its front shoulder. It fell instantly, its final breath wheezing out into the dense jungle air. Harper stood, panting, as Gorth released the carcass and let out a triumphant roar. They'd done it. From the trees, other Cathan warriors emerged, Zor among them. He walked slowly toward Harper, nodding with solemn approval. You honor our traditions. The bond between you and Gorth is real. It is strong. Harper, still catching his breath, looked at his partner and smiled. He's incredible. You both are, Zor said. That evening, the return to the Cathon city was marked by celebration. Fires were lit in every quarter, drums thundered, and chants echoed across the canyons. Cathon warriors retold the stories of the hunt in loud, booming voices while sharing spiced meats and fermented drinks. Harper and his crew were given seats of honor around the central fire. Gorth lay beside Harper, relaxed and content, occasionally nudging his shoulder when he paused in his meal. The bond was unmistakable. You've done more than win a hunt, Zor told Harper as the stars blinked into view above them. You've changed how we see your people. You've reminded us that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it scratches behind the ears. Harper laughed. If someone told me that I'd be sitting around a campfire with a death beast nudging me for scraps, I would have thought they'd lost it. Yet here you are, Zor said. And now you carry our mark. You are not merely a guest. You are kin. Harper's crew, Lieutenant Carter, Sergeant Lynn, Specialist Vega, and the rest were also honored. Each had proven themselves, not just through survival, but through respect, adaptation, and effort. The Cathon offered them shared status clan names, ceremonial trinkets, and the kind of recognition that wasn't easily earned in warrior culture. In the days that followed, Harper remained on Cathra Prime. He worked with Cathon Beastmasters, helped establish training protocols, and documented what he'd learned about interspecies communication. But perhaps most importantly, he listened. He absorbed the philosophy of the Cathon, how they saw the world, how they viewed honor, life, and connection. And they, in turn, began to listen to him. When Harper finally prepared to depart, a ceremony was held in the same arena where the hunt had begun. Zor stood beside him, as did Gorth. You came here a stranger, Zor said, addressing the gathered crowd. You leave as a brother. Harper placed a hand on Gorth's head one last time. I'll be back, we know, Zor said. And when you return, your place will be waiting. As the human ship lifted off into the Cathon sky, leaving behind the fires, the chants, and the deep crimson cliffs of Cathra Prime, the bond between species remained not a temporary alliance, but something deeper. Harper had not just tamed a beast, he had built a bridge, and the galaxy was watching. Captain Jack Harper wasn't prepared for what came next, not really. After the events on Cathra Prime, after the Grey Hunt, after he stood shoulder to shoulder with a death beast and earned the respect of the Cathon Warrior Society, he figured things would quiet down. Maybe a few interviews, some diplomatic handshakes, a medal or two, then back to the field. He was wrong. Instead, Harper became the centerpiece of a conversation that reached across the stars. His name was discussed in council chambers, whispered among diplomats, and studied in lecture halls from Venus Orbital Academy to the distant Lumari moon schools. More than just a viral sensation, his actions were being reinterpreted as something far more significant, a tactical advantage. Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, Admiral Garv, saw it first. The question isn't whether Harper's bond with that beast was impressive, Garv told the council during a closed session briefing. Question is, what if it wasn't a fluke? What if it's something most humans can do, if properly trained? If we can replicate that kind of interaction, it opens a door we didn't even know existed. What kind of door? One counselor asked skeptically. Garv leaned forward. A new form of diplomacy. Peace through presence, understanding through instinct. We've tried policy. We've tried weapons. What if we tried connection? At first, many council members were skeptical, especially those from militaristic or hyperlogical species who viewed emotion as a hindrance, not a strength. But as more research poured in behavioral studies, xenobiological findings, field reports from other human teams working with alien fauna, the evidence grew too loud to ignore. Humans weren't just unusually good at bonding with animals. They were exceptional at it. Not only that, they could do it across biological, evolutionary, and even cognitive gaps that most species considered insurmountable. Creatures that had resisted training, repelled other sentients, or behaved with consistent aggression toward outsiders were suddenly calming in the presence of humans. This wasn't limited to Harper anymore. Other examples were cropping up across various colonies and frontier missions. So the council voted, unanimously. For the first time in decades, every single representative agreed to launch a joint initiative led by humanity, designed around a simple yet radical premise: harness human empathy to form peaceful relationships with some of the galaxy's most dangerous or misunderstood species. They named it the Human-Animal Cooperation Program, HOP for short. Harper didn't learn about the program's approval from a press release or newsfeed. He learned about it from Garv himself, who personally contacted him aboard the Odyssey, the research vessel Harper had been quietly refitting for deep exploration. Garv appeared on the comm screen, face stern, but with that familiar glint in his eye. "Jack," he said, "you're officially being promoted." Harper raised a brow. "To what, Beast Petter-in-Chief?" Garv chuckled. "Close. You're now the first official ambassador of the HOP. I didn't sign up to be a politician, Admiral." "You didn't," Garv said, nodding. "You signed up to explore. And that's what this is. But instead of mapping star systems or cataloging minerals, you're going to map hearts. You're going to build bridges where none existed. And you'll have backup this time. Teens, scientists, trainers, biologists. We're going to figure out what you did, how you did it, and teach others to do the same." Harper leaned back in his chair and exhaled. Part of him was excited. Another part was overwhelmed. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Never been sure of anything," Garv replied. "This isn't just about animals, Jack. It's about peace. You have a gift, and the galaxy needs it." The official HOC launch took place on Station Meriden, a central diplomatic outpost orbiting neutral territory. Over 50 species attended the opening ceremony, including high-ranking diplomats, scientists, military officials, and media correspondents. A huge holographic banner displayed the program's motto, "Understanding before fear." Harper stood at the center stage, a modest man in a sharp Navy uniform. Beside him were his closest crew, Lieutenant Carter, Specialist Vega, and Sergeant Lin, along with a few new additions, xenobiologists, veterinarians, and behaviorists from Earth and other friendly worlds. In his speech, Harper didn't try to sound grand or academic. He spoke plainly. "I'm not here because I'm the smartest guy in the room, or the strongest. I'm here because, for whatever reason, when I looked at something that should have killed me, I didn't see a monster. I saw something scared, and I reached out. That's it. That's what we're doing here, reaching out. Again and again, until someone reaches back." His words resonated far beyond the chamber. Across thousands of worlds, the message of the HOP took root. The first official mission under the new program came within days. A desperate plea from the planet Xeria, where colonists were under constant threat from the Razor Beast's giant quadrupeds with jagged spines and extreme territorial instinct. Dozens of settlement efforts had failed. No species, not even Xeria's native diplomats, had managed to communicate with the creatures, let alone coexist. Harper didn't hesitate. He and a small hand-picked team, including xenopsychologist Dr. Maya Chen, former wildlife ranger Miguel Alvarez, and Xeria native liaison Druk Marchval, arrived in orbit 2 days later. The situation was worse than expected. Most of the planet's surface was dotted with ruined outposts and defensive structures now abandoned or overgrown. The colonists were confined to a single-walled settlement in the northern hemisphere, with razor beasts spotted patrolling the edges daily. Automated turrets kept them at bay, but tensions were rising. Resources were running low. When Harper walked out past the gates the first time, he didn't carry a weapon. Just a scanner and a dried protein bar. His team watched from a distance, The razor beasts were already approaching 4 of them, each larger than a hover tank, with thick black spines jutting from their backs like saw blades. One roared a warning, shaking the ground. But Harper didn't flinch. He moved slowly, stopping a few dozen feet away, and sat down cross-legged on the ground. He opened the protein bar, broke off a piece, and set it on the dirt. Then he just waited. Minutes passed. A tense silence. Then, one of the beasts, a slightly smaller one with a bent dorsal spine, stepped forward. Its movements were cautious but curious. It sniffed the air, then sniffed the protein bar, then sniffed Harper. Then, incredibly, it laid down. The entire camp, watching the live drone feed, gasped. It was happening again. Over the next several weeks, Harper and his team embedded themselves on Zyria. They studied razor beast behavior patterns, mapped migration routes, analyzed scent trails, and observed communication rituals. Harper personally bonded with 3 more of the creatures using a mix of food, posture, and consistent vocal tones. He even started naming them Blade, Tusk, and Mocha because it drooled brown foam. But it wasn't just Harper. Dr. Chen discovered that human heart rates and breathing patterns had a calming effect on the beasts, especially when paired with rhythmic tones. Alvarez, the former ranger, began teaching colonists how to read nonverbal signs of aggression and stress in the animals. Marchval developed a simple visual signaling system using color and light to alert razor beasts to human activity. Bit by bit, a fragile peace emerged. For the first time, colonists left the gates without fear. Children watched from rooftops as the massive beasts passed nearby, no longer seen as monsters, but as neighbors. By the end of the month, the Zyria Council declared the program a miracle of compassion and offered permanent base support to HAP operations. Harper and his team were honored in a planet-wide broadcast. When asked how he felt, Harper simply replied, "Like we're just getting started." The success on Zyria made headlines across the galaxy, not in the explosive clickbait way that Harper's Death Beast footage had, but in a steadier, more powerful rhythm. Articles spoke of the quiet revolution. Others coined terms like affectional diplomacy or instinctual peacekeeping. But the message was clear. Humans brought something new to the table, not just intelligence, not just strength, but the ability to connect. And as more requests poured in from mining colonies plagued by burrowing titans, jungle outposts disrupted by hive creatures, and oceanic stations besieged by psychic cephalopods, the Hawk expanded rapidly. Training facilities were built on Earth, Mars, Luna, and even aboard orbital platforms. Entire courses were developed on cross-species behavioral psychology, empathy-based communication, and non-verbal bonding techniques. Volunteers from multiple human nations applied in droves, eager to be part of what was quickly becoming humanity's most inspiring export. For Harper, though, none of it changed his approach. Whether dealing with alien death machines or misunderstood territorial predators, he always went back to the basics: slow steps, calm breathing, open hands, and respect. "You can't fake it," he told new recruits during a training session. "They feel it, whatever it is. Fear, confidence, calm, love. If you're faking it, they know. You gotta mean it. You gotta want to understand them." The Human-Animal Cooperation Program wasn't just about controlling creatures. It was about redefining what power looked like. Not through fear, not through dominance, but through the courage to be gentle in a universe that had forgotten how. By the time the last razor beast on Zyria let Harper rest its massive head on his lap, the Human-Animal Cooperation Program had become more than just an initiative. It was a movement. News feeds across the galaxy had shifted their tone from skepticism to admiration. Military leaders, once wary of the program's soft power, began requesting HAP advisors for their peacekeeping missions. Even the more isolationist species, those who had once scoffed at humanity's emotional nature, began to reconsider their views. And in the middle of it all, Captain Jack Harper remained as humble as ever. He wasn't looking to be a legend. He wasn't doing it for recognition or political leverage. He was doing it because, deep down, he believed connection wasn't just a tactic, it was a purpose. Every being, no matter how strange, aggressive, or alien, deserved to be understood. And sometimes, that understanding started with nothing more than a steady hand and a quiet voice. But if Zariah had been a proving ground, then Harper's next assignment would be something else entirely, a test not just of empathy, but of endurance, risk, and resolve. The mining world of Drar was not a place most people went willingly. The planet's surface was a scarred, jagged wasteland shaped by centuries of relentless extraction. The Drans, a short, stocky, rock-skinned species, had lived among the mineral-rich ranges for millennia. Their society revolved around excavation, efficiency, and pragmatism. Beauty meant nothing to them, only results did. And their biggest obstacle wasn't nature, it was the Dayan stone serpents. These creatures, enormous and ancient, were so closely bonded with Drar's subterranean crust that their bodies resembled moving geological formations. When dormant, they were indistinguishable from the stone walls around them. But when agitated, they erupted with explosive violence, tearing through mining rigs, collapsing tunnels, and sending entire drill teams fleeing. The Drains had tried everything: sonic deterrents, seismic dampeners, even firebombing entire caverns. Nothing worked. The serpents always came back, more aggressive, more unpredictable. In desperation, the Dran Council reached out to the Hop. Harper read the mission brief with a tight jaw. "Living mountains," he murmured. "That's new." Dr. Maya Chen, who had stayed on after the Ziria mission, looked over the data. Their neural networks are dense, primitive but vast. They're more instinct than intelligence. But that instinct is incredibly territorial. Harper closed the file and looked out at the stars. "Then we don't go in like miners. We go in like guests." The moment Harper's shuttle landed in Drar's main operations hub, the tension was obvious. The Drains were polite but wary. Their leader, Chief Engineer Korvix, spoke with clipped efficiency. "We requested a specialist, not a diplomat." "I'm both," Harper said calmly. "And I'm not here to make friends with the rocks. I'm here to stop them from killing your people." Korvix didn't laugh. He just handed Harper a geological scanner and motioned toward the deep shaft that led into the northern tunnels. "They live down there. We avoid it when we can, but the richest mineral veins run through it." Harper looked at the dark mouth of the shaft and felt a familiar tingle run through his spine. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of possibility. The first expedition into the depths of Drar wasn't without risk. Harper took a small team: Dr. Chen, Alvarez, and 2 Dran miners who knew the terrain. The tunnels twisted like natural catacombs, with echoing groans vibrating through the walls. Then, without warning, the ground trembled. A wall cracked open, and from it emerged a stone serpent. It was colossal, easily 100 meters long. Its obsidian-like scales shimmered in the low light. Glowing veins of crystal pulsed across its body, and its mouth opened to reveal teeth like shards of quartz. Everyone froze. Harper didn't. He stepped forward slowly, cautiously, his voice steady. "You're beautiful," he said softly, the words echoing faintly off the stone. "You don't want to fight." "Neither do I." The serpent let out a low rumble, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Harper dropped to one knee and placed a gloved hand on the ground. "I see you," he whispered. "You're not a threat. You're a guardian. I respect that." The rumble softened. And then, in an act none of the team could have predicted, the serpent lowered its head until its snout nearly touched Harper's hand. He reached forward and laid his palm gently on the smooth, warm stone. The tunnel vibrated again, not with threat, but with recognition. From that point on, everything changed. In the weeks that followed, Harper's team worked side by side with Dran engineers to develop new mining protocols. They learned that the serpents reacted violently only when their nesting grounds were disrupted or when exposed to certain frequencies used by deep drill machinery. By adjusting those signals and mapping serpent territories, the team created a network of safe zones. Even more surprising, some of the serpents began to assist. One particularly massive specimen, dubbed Tremor by Alvarez, started leading crews toward untouched mineral veins, avoiding their nests and reducing structural damage. Tremor never let anyone else touch him, but he followed Harper like a silent sentinel through the mines. For the first time in a century, the Drons saw their ancient enemies as allies. When the project concluded, Chief Korvix addressed the Galactic Council directly via hologram. "Captain Harper has done what drills and bombs could not. He showed us how to listen. For that, Drar owes humanity a great debt." Harper barely had time to breathe before the next mission arrived. This one was different. Not a problem of territory or aggression, but of perception and emotion, and one that struck at the core of Harper's deepest challenge yet. The planet Zalara was home to the Quick, a reclusive, telepathic species who lived in a luminous forest environment, rich with psychotropic flora. The Quick were normally peaceful. Their culture revolved around harmony and shared mental space. But lately, their telepathic beasts, normally tranquil, had grown erratic and violent. These creatures, towering, antlered quadrupeds with shimmering coats, were deeply linked to the Quick's collective mind. When they turned, it wasn't just dangerous, it was traumatic for the entire planet. The Quick reached out to the Hop, not with urgency, but with desperation. "We do not understand what has poisoned our minds," their leader communed through an empathic envoy. "We need someone who can feel what we cannot say." Zalara was unlike any world Harper had ever visited. The air shimmered with bioluminescent particles. The trees pulsed softly with light. The very ground seemed to breathe. But the peace was only surface deep. A storm lurked beneath the beast's unrest, rippling through the psychic field like a current of anxiety. Harper's first encounter with a Quick beast nearly overwhelmed him. The moment it entered his presence, a flood of emotions, fear, confusion, pain crashed into his mind like a tidal wave. He staggered, knees buckling, clutching his head. "Too much," he gasped. But he didn't back away. Instead, he sat, still, silent, and breathed. In, out, slowly the current faded, and in its place came something else: curiosity. The beast stepped closer. Harper extended a trembling hand, not to touch, but to be seen. "I'm here," he whispered. "I feel you." Working with the Quick was unlike any mission before. Harper couldn't rely solely on physical cues. He had to learn to think in feelings, to project calm, trust, peace. He worked closely with Quick guides, meditating under the glow of mind flowers, opening himself to a kind of vulnerability he'd never experienced. Eventually, through a combination of sensory mapping, emotional translation, and exploration, the truth surfaced. A buried alien structure beneath the forest, long dormant, had been recently reactivated by seismic activity. It emitted a low-frequency pulse, imperceptible to most beings, but agonizingly disruptive to the telepathic field of the beasts. Harper led the operation to disable the structure. It required delicate balance, technical finesse, emotional stability, and deep cooperation between human and Quick. But it worked. The moment the signal ceased, the forest sighed. The beasts, once for all, moved gently again. The anxiety lifted like fog after a storm. The Quick gathered for a final communion, surrounding Harper with light and thought. "You have healed not only our beasts, but our spirits," their leader said. "You taught us that even minds foreign to our own can bring peace. You reminded us that silence, when filled with intention, can be louder than words." Harper didn't say much in return. He didn't need to. Instead, He knelt beside one of the newly calmed beasts, pressed his forehead gently against its side, and simply breathed. By the end of the Zalara mission, Harper's reputation had transcended species and borders. No longer just the man who could pet anything, he had become a symbol of patience, compassion, courage, and the quiet strength of empathy. The hop grew faster than anyone predicted. More ambassadors were trained, more missions were launched. But through it all, one truth remained constant. The most powerful act in the galaxy wasn't a show of strength. It was the willingness to reach out and be kind. Years had passed since Captain Jack Harper first reached out his hand to the Kothan Death Beast and changed the course of interstellar history. What began as a single, reckless, instinctual act of empathy had evolved into one of the most transformative diplomatic initiatives the galaxy had ever seen. The Human-Animal Cooperation Program, once considered experimental, had grown into a pillar of the Galactic Council's peacekeeping efforts. From volcanic worlds to floating jungle biospheres, human ambassadors had been dispatched to over 100 planets, often facing creatures considered untamable, wild, or outright hostile. And again, they'd done the impossible. Not through force, not through intimidation, but through something simple and universal. Trust, connection, the human touch, and at the heart of it all remained Harper. Not because he sought power or recognition, but because he kept showing up, boots in the dirt, sleeves rolled up, calm in his voice and warmth in his eyes. His latest assignment had taken him to Helios V, a planet of vast meadows and crystalline winds, where songbirds could shatter metal and mist spirits mourned in flocks. It was quiet work, more spiritual than scientific. Harper found himself not petting or soothing predators this time, but simply listening, sitting among the nomadic shepherds who had once feared the singing flocks and now sang with them. He was older now, a little slower on the climb, a little more deliberate in his steps. The gray in his beard had grown in, and the wear of so many worlds showed in his face. But his eyes hadn't changed. They still saw beauty in the terrifying, grace in the misunderstood. He was preparing to leave Helios when the call came from Admiral Garv, now head of Council Affairs. "Jack," Garv said over the secure channel, "they want to honor you. Officially. Statues, stories, maybe even a holiday." Harper chuckled. "You know I don't care about that." "I know," Garv said. "But the galaxy does. You've become something bigger. More than one man. A symbol of what's possible." Harper went quiet for a long moment. Then he replied, "If they want a statue, make sure I'm kneeling next to a beast, not standing over it." Garv smiled. Deal. Back on Earth, Harper was welcomed as a hero. Not with parades or fireworks. He'd asked specifically for none of that, but with quiet appreciation. Children in schools reenacted his first contact with the Death Beast. Holodocumentaries played across every major news station. The HAP training academies were full of hopeful recruits, many of whom had grown up watching his missions unfold across the stars. But it wasn't just about Harper anymore. His story had become a spark. And from that spark, fires of change had lit across every corner of the galaxy. On Drar, the stone serpents now worked in tandem with the mining teams, guiding them away from sacred tunnels in exchange for peace and protection. Tremor, Harper's old companion, had become a sort of mascot, his image etched onto the uniforms of deep shaft operators. On Ziria, razor beasts were no longer shot on sight. They patrolled settlement perimeters like guardians, a natural security system forged not through programming, mutual respect. And on Zalara, the Quick had built a memorial garden where the psychic field once throbbed with pain. At its center was a simple stone, engraved with a message in quick glyphs and Earth Standard English. He came to feel, not to fix. And in doing so, healed what we did not know was broken. The Galactic Council eventually voted to adopt the Hockey principles into broader interspecies diplomacy training. It was no longer just about animals. The methods active listening, emotional honesty, nonverbal communication, patience, and respect had become tools for resolving political and cultural conflicts between sentient species. Ambassadors from Earth taught workshops on non-confrontational postures. Therapists from Luna developed cross-species empathy simulations. Refugees from war-torn worlds found healing through guided connection sessions with empathetic human mediators. What had once been seen as soft had become the galaxy's strongest thread of unity. One day, Harper visited a remote Hap outpost on Tarsus 3, a windy planet with biting cold and ice-lurking beasts. There, he met a young recruit, a bright-eyed woman named Kamari, who approached him shyly. "You're the reason I joined," she said. "I saw you on Zalara. I was only a kid, but I'll never forget how the beast leaned into you. Like it was safe." Harper gave her a small smile. It was safe. It just didn't know it yet. Kamari hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Weren't you ever afraid that one of them might turn? That one day you'd reach out your hand, and it would be the last thing you ever did?" Harper looked out at the snowy horizon for a long moment. The wind howled softly. "Of course," he said. "Every time." "Then why did you keep doing it?" He turned to her, eyes calm and steady. "Because the risk of connection is still less than the cost of fear." She nodded, and in that moment, something passed between them, a torch, quietly handed from one generation to the next. In his final years, Harper returned to Cathra Prime, the place where it all began. The Kathon had preserved the ceremonial arena where he'd earned his place among them. Gorth, the death beast he'd bonded with during the Great Hunt, had lived a long life and passed peacefully, surrounded by the new generation of warrior beasts trained using Harper's methods. The Kathon built a monument near the cliffs, a stone carving of Harper kneeling beside Gorth, his hand resting gently on the beast's massive head. He stood before it in silence one morning, the twin suns casting long shadows across the sand. "I didn't tame you," he whispered. "You let me in." As the years passed, stories of Harper spread far and wide. Not in the grandiose, exaggerated way legends often do, but in quiet recollections, passed from mouth to mouth, world to world. Some called him the Beast Whisperer, others the Peacemaker without armor, but most simply called him what he always was, a man who chose to reach out when others chose to run. A real-world reflection, Captain Jack Harper's fictional story resonates so deeply because it mirrors something profoundly true about us here and now. In a world increasingly defined by conflict, suspicion, and division, Harper reminds us that connection is a choice, a risk, a leap of faith, but it's one worth taking every day we meet people who seem different strangers with unfamiliar views, cultures, behaviors, or beliefs. It's easy to retreat into fear or indifference, to raise our guard, to expect danger. But what if, like Harper, we leaned in instead? What if we met judgment with curiosity? What if we replaced fear with compassion? In schools, communities, workplaces, even in global diplomacy, the principles of the Human-Animal Cooperation Program already exist. We just call them by different names. Active listening, empathy, emotional intelligence, respect. The lesson of Harper's journey isn't about petting space beasts. It's about understanding that the most powerful force in any universe, real or imagined, is the willingness to see another being as worthy of love, safety, and respect. And that when we do, the monsters often disappear. What remains are just hearts beating, scared, beautiful, waiting for someone to say, "You're safe with me."